Hello, everybody, and welcome to this month's video blog with the CHEK Institute. This is our Healthy by Design series with Joe. So excited to have Joe with us. This series has been already with our first video. It's been fantastic. If you haven't seen our first video in this series, it was Juicing 101. If you're interested in juicing or you're a juicing vet, you want to watch this video because it has some really crucial details. So we'll put the link to that in the blog below. But today we're going to be talking about overcoming chronic fatigue with nutrition. And this is such an important topic. We're lucky to have Joe with us. Thank you, Joe, and welcome.
Thank you, James. Always a pleasure to be with you. It's one of my favorite times of the month.
You're going to make me blush.
And do you remember last month how I was being attacked by flies?
I do.
I'm prepared now. Because they're
Excellent.
still out. And
Yes.
I just thought, this is it.
One
No more
smack, and
flies.
I think the rest of the flies will get the picture.
You've got it.
Great. So yes, we're ready. And for chronic fatigue is just, I think it's a really important topic. It's something that, as with juicing last month, it's something that we hear a lot about. We kind of hear it's on the rise, but I think folks aren't really exactly sure what exactly chronic fatigue entails. But we talk about it as though it's kind of the next epidemic. And I understand that it's the number one symptom now that patients are taking to see their GPs, their general practitioners. So it's a really current topic, and I think that's going to be great. And I understand that you're going to share with us some simple and easy ways that we can boost our energy and maybe some strategic tips for long-term recovery as well. And maybe at the end, I think you mentioned a little something for our viewers too, if they stick with us through the whole thing. Not that the information is going to be great and worth it alone, but there's a little something at the end. So that's exciting. So yes, so why don't we just dive right in? Right, our goal is to try to keep under that 20-minute mark. So let's do it. Let's dive in. Let's start by talking about just what is chronic fatigue, and I understand that it relates to the adrenals. So maybe you can talk about what the adrenals are and how that relates to chronic fatigue.
Sure. Okay. So just a little bit of context there for people. Hopefully we're reaching an audience where it's a mixture of people that are just beginning their path, as well as those that are somewhat more educated along the road. So for those that kind of have heard adrenals, and they're actually glands.
Mm-hmm.
A little bit of anatomy. They sit on the top of the kidneys.
Mm-hmm.
Like these couple of little grapes that sit on top of the kidneys. And there's two parts of the adrenal glands, if you like. There's the adrenal cortex, and then there's the adrenal medulla. Okay, if I
It's a
pronounce
mouthful.
that. It is a mouthful. And that's the thing, when you start talking about all the different hormones of the adrenals, they do become a bit of a mouthful.
Mm.
So we'll keep it relatively easy and simple and digestible. But what we need to just remember is that the adrenal cortex is the outer part of the adrenal gland, which produces what's kind of more considered to be the life essential hormones. We
Mm-hmm.
need them for life.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. And then the medulla, the inner part of the gland, produces hormones that are not essential for life, but they absolutely play some really important roles.
Right.
Okay. So just as an example there of those type of hormones, most people are quite familiar with the stress hormone cortisol.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so that's produced by the cortex of the adrenal glands.
Mm-hmm.
But there's a little bit of a cascading effect that happens before the adrenals actually release the hormones. And that is, if we just kind of backstep for a moment, we have what we call this Hpa Axis, which is the hypothalamus, the pituitary, and the adrenals. Okay. And the hypothalamus is, again, as part of the brain that secretes what we call a chemical or a hormone called corticoid it's another big word. I'm always trying to, get my mouth around it.
Yeah.
It's corticotrophin releasing factor.
Oh my.
Okay.
Yes.
So it's this big, science word.
Yeah.
But really all we got to remember is that it's the first level of hormones that when we're having a stress response, when we feel that our life is under threat,
Yeah.
whether that is reality,
Mm-hmm.
and it actually is,
Mm-hmm.
or whether or not we're just, because of our thoughts, projecting a concept of that our body believes either way.
Right.
Okay, so the body being the subconscious mind, if we think that we're under threat, then the body starts to physiologically express itself as if that is true,
Okay.
regardless of whether or not it's reality.
Right. So whether I'm facing physical violence or my rent is coming due and I don't have the money, the body is reacting very similarly.
Absolutely. Both are, life-threatening
Mm-hmm.
concepts.
Yeah.
Yes, which, to the degree in which you have kind of bought into finance as being a life-threatening situation for you, and you associate, safety and security by how much is in the bank or your ability, as you say, to pay rent, then it's going to elicit that kind of fight, flight, and high level of insecurity within you that, for your association personally as an individual could be life-threatening.
Yep.
Okay.
Yep.
So as we have that, we've got the hypothalamus that as I said, secretes this corticotrophin releasing factor. That then sends a message to the pituitary gland to secrete another hormone called adrenal corticotrophic hormone. Okay. That then sends a message finally to the adrenal glands.
Okay.
And that then sends a message saying to release what we know as corticoid hormones, cortisol being the most common.
Right.
Okay. So, that's kind of the basic things to remember about the adrenal glands. Essentially, there are two parts. They secrete different hormones. One, the outer cortex, producing more life-threatening or life essential hormones to life, and then the inner part, as I said, incredibly important but not life-threatening.
Right.
Okay, and then what we then have is this concept of adrenal fatigue that essentially happens when we are in a state of constant, what we call chronic stress, whereby whatever our thoughts, whatever our circumstances are, that is, constantly creating this Hpa Axis, hypothalamus, pituitary, adrenals, to go through the secretion of those hormones. Okay. And, I also, just as an example, the part of the inner part of the adrenals that produces a hormone called aldosterone is important for regulating blood pressure.
Okay.
And also regulating water and salt in the body. And that's one of the hormones produced by the inner part of the adrenal glands.
Wow.
Okay.
Okay.
So as we go through and we are in a state of, chronic stress, it gets to the point where our adrenals literally become so fatigued at going through the secretion of those hormones or those stress hormones, where to the point where our cortisol levels remain elevated constantly. And there's 4 stages of adrenal fatigue: first, second, third, fourth stage adrenal fatigue. And basically they are showing you the, if you like, the benchmark of how far down the road the adrenals have gone to being almost whipped into submission.
Right.
Yeah, where they can no longer do their job properly.
Right.
So I think what's probably useful for our listeners is to perhaps take what I've said and maybe, ask yourselves, well, what does that look and feel like for me in life? So how do I know
Yeah.
if I'm suffering from adrenal fatigue?
Yeah.
So, some of the real common factors or symptoms there are, obviously chronic tiredness.
Yeah.
Okay. There's so many related symptoms that, manifest themselves um, as a result of your vitality dropping, which is exactly what happens when you become more and more tired and you haven't learned how to take your foot off the gas and actually replenish yourself and replenish your engine, okay, or replenish your vehicle.
Right.
So, it would be a bit like, taking your car out and running it until it's empty on petrol and then continuing to still try and run it.
Yep. It's just not going to work.
It's just not going to work. You're going to find a time, as I did, some 10 years ago, the way I was living my life, I got to a point where I actually couldn't get up in the morning.
Wow.
And I found myself bedridden for a period of time through chronic fatigue.
Right.
So, it was a slow downward spiral for me. It wasn't obvious at the beginning because, we're so good at mentally overriding the body.
Yeah.
And, not really listening to the signs and symptoms and Dr. Payne until he knocks you over with a truck.
Yeah.
Just can keep on coming. And we've got very good ways of just, sweeping them under the carpet or, various people's pain thresholds are higher than others and all of these various things. So, chronic tiredness, depression, another great one is I started to feel, I knew kind of something was wrong, but again, I didn't listen to it, when I would be constantly tired first thing in the morning, found it really hard to get going first thing in the morning, but then around, 5, 6, 7, it's like I got a second wind.
Wow.
And it was like my energy levels, how I wanted to feel at the beginning of the day kind of kicked in at about, 5, 6, 7 o'clock at night. And so that's when I started, feeling I could get more work done. Little did I know that, listening to that again was not, listening to it in a way that wasn't supportive to me, rather than listening and going, okay, this isn't kind of normal to circadian rhythms. I should be actually starting to unwind and feel tired right now. Why am I starting to feel jacked up and wired?
Right. And I was going to say that must be disruptive to your sleep patterns, right? You get all this energy later in the evening. You feel like you need to do the work. You work well past 10, 11 o'clock at night when we should be going to sleep, and the whole thing compounds.
That's it. Because, during the day, I haven't really felt that productive because I've been tired and sluggish.
Yeah.
So, so then you kind of beat up on yourself and then you get this second wind. You think, oh, I'll take advantage of that now and get what I felt I should have got done during the day, and I'll do it now.
Yeah.
But as you say, you continue to, a vicious cycle and a downward spiral.
Yeah.
So, sweet cravings and salty cravings of food is another, indication. Anxiety and irritability, an inability to deal with the small stuff is another really good, indication that you just, the yin and the yang is completely out of balance again. Weight gain, weight loss. And I say both because it really does depend on how your thyroid responds to adrenal fatigue, because once the adrenals are fatigued, that starts to affect the thyroid, and you can either go into hyper or hypo, and that's a lot to do with what your genetic predisposition is. I've seen a lot of people go into chronic fatigue and they actually put on weight, and that's combined with, how they manage stress. A lot of people end up eating more, whereas other people start to eat less and less and less.
Sure.
And so, a little bit of a combination there of really how we manage our stress determines, as along with some genetics around thyroid, determines whether or not the weight goes on or the weight is lost.
Right.
So they're kind of some of the key symptoms. I think that, go. You've got a question there.
You read me so well. I was going to ask about the immune system and whether there are consequences for the immune system as well.
Absolutely. You know, the immune system is one of the first systems, the hormonal system and the immune system so closely interlinked that the moment that we have a drop in vitality,
Mm-hmm.
a drop in our energy, fatigue sets in, then our immune system is going to be suppressed.
Right.
And we become more susceptible to the colds, the flus,
Yeah.
whatever's going around.
Yeah.
We also then become more susceptible to things that kind of have this cascading effect on the body through tiredness that's not addressed, through vitality that drops. We think of ourselves like a host.
Yeah.
And as a host, if our vitality isn't up and our frequency isn't high,
Mm-hmm.
then we become susceptible for, becoming the home of parasites and funguses and bacteria. And although that's part of the environment we are internally,
Mm-hmm.
it's about being in a state of homeostasis with those bacterium,
Yeah.
so that they work in synergy with us,
Yeah.
rather than we become the host and they overtake the environment.
Mm-hmm.
And then obviously that leads to so many other problems as well.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So that sets the picture. So we know now kind of how the adrenal glands work and how that fits with chronic fatigue. How do you get it? How do you sort of come to that place where your adrenals just go, I give up?
It's a really good question, and I think that if people were more aware of how quickly it can happen,
Mm-hmm.
um, maybe they would stop in their tracks and look at doing things differently. But having said that, kind of Dr. Pain is a great motivator, and sometimes we have to get to the point where we really feel something in order to start changing and doing things differently.
Yeah.
But chronic fatigue, which as we've talked about, builds and builds and builds. So
Yeah.
it starts off small and kind of picks up momentum.
Mm-hmm.
Um, it's essentially through living life in the fast lane and never changing your lane.
Okay.
uh,
Yeah.
and that looks different for everybody.
Yeah.
Living in the fast lane is kind of, what it looks like for one person to have their foot to the pedal and, flat out on the gas can
Yeah.
look quite different to somebody else.
Yeah.
So somebody running themselves into the ground physically in the gym,
Mm-hmm.
whereby over time they've created chronic fatigue for themselves, versus somebody, in the corporate world
Right.
running themselves into, 14, 16, 18-hour days
Yeah.
and not understanding how to balance the input with the output.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay, to a mum,
Mm-hmm.
who's got a toddler or newborn, where her sleep deprivation in those early years is significantly impacted, and depending on the temperament of that child, whether it does or it doesn't sleep,
Mm-hmm.
and then all the things that need to be done as
Yeah.
a mother, that
Yeah.
if they haven't kind of really learned to put a routine into place that helps support them, not just their newborn,
Mm-hmm.
then we can find ourselves hitting down the
Sure.
chronic fatigue road there. So no
Yeah.
matter what the various environments are, they're all susceptible
Mm-hmm.
if we're not careful,
Yeah.
to taking us down that road.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I think the biggest thing that we have to look at balancing is this idea of energy in versus energy out.
Right.
And that only can really happen when people start to slow down
Yeah.
and really know how to check in with what I call their real energy.
Mm-hmm.
Have you ever had that experience where you're tired but you're wired?
Oh yeah. 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 Definitely. I was in grad school. That was me 24 hours a day. Yeah. Yeah.
Okay, so that's another great sign that your foot's on the pedal and you're not easing off, and underneath, if you eased off just a little underneath, you'd realize just how
Yeah.
tired and
Yeah.
exhausted you are.
Yeah.
But the central nervous system is so revved up, and because
Mm-hmm.
we keep ourselves so revved up with so many other stimulances
Yeah.
out there
Mm-hmm.
and stimuli, whether that's through food or caffeine or drugs or
Video games.
video games,
Mm.
technology,
Yeah.
electromagnetic, stress
Yeah.
in our lives, even down to what we think.
Yeah.
I love, I always use Paul's saying, stinking thinking will,
Right.
be the
Right.
fastest way to send you to your grave.
Yeah.
Quicker than the processed food and
Hmm.
everything else. If you've got
Hmm.
some serious stinking thinking going on,
Yeah.
then that is such a drain on the body.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's an absolute drain on your chi, on everything.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay, so have a look in your day-to-day life, and be honest with yourself.
Hmm.
If you're somebody who's there's a difference between loving life and trying to pack it all in, but if you don't know how to balance that, loving life isn't going to be enough when you're flat, lying flat supine on your bed,
That's
not
right.
being able to get up and enjoy life, as
Yeah.
was I 10 years ago.
Right. And we've been talking about Dr. Payne. Paul sometimes likes to call him the pain teacher, right? And the pain teacher, you will learn from the pain teacher, but it's always so much better to figure it out well before the pain teacher comes along and smacks you, as you said, smacks you supine, right?
A life of prevention is most certainly the most idyllic, but the
Yes.
reality of that for most people. And I think that's a really important point there. Living life as a prevention is a beautiful you know lifestyle to strive for,
Yeah.
but we have to remember that it's as you say, it's the teacher
Yeah.
that comes and gives us the lessons, and we would
Hmm.
never grow and evolve without the lessons. So
Right.
we have to be grateful for both,
Yeah. Exactly.
hence why we come back to that balance yet again.
Yes. And so, speaking of balance, let's get to the second part of our talk. How do we use food to nourish and heal our adrenals, to do the
Hmm.
balancing?
That's a great question, James, and I think one of the first things is to really be aware of the things that we need to start avoiding.
Hmm.
Okay, and because at the end of the day, we can start supplementing our diet with some really nourishing foods that are going to support the adrenals, but it's only going to be so effective for as long as we're also putting in
Yeah.
all the various things that stimulate and stress the adrenals further. So, obviously we're looking to avoid, processed foods.
Hmm.
Okay, that's obviously a big one.
Yeah.
Caffeine, candy, and confectionery items.
Hmm.
Um, Again, we spoke about too much technology,
Yeah.
too much stimuli.
Hmm.
Um, Exercise.
Hmm.
Again, people who are, addicted to that adrenaline feeling,
Hmm.
that's helping them to kind of stay up there.
Yeah.
Understanding what sort of exercise. It's never about not exercising. It's never
Hmm.
about not moving.
Hmm.
It's just understanding how we can use the natural form of movement that we need in order to evolve, but
Yeah.
how can we use it intelligently to support wherever we are in life?
Hmm. Hmm.
Okay, so that we can always feel that movement is so important in just processing mental emotional energy through us.
Hmm.
Okay, so eating times is another really important
Hmm.
consideration. People who are fatigued tend to, in my experience, skip breakfast.
Hmm.
They're the ones that just get up and get going straight away, down with the coffee. That's kind of the first,
Yep.
energy hit or kick.
Yeah.
Um, and, all of these various stimuli are what are, as I say, whipping the adrenals
Yeah.
each each time you make a choice like that.
Hmm.
Okay, so just being mindful about those various elements.
Hmm.
to avoid.
Mm-hmm.
And then when we really look at what we can start to consume from a food and nutrition perspective,
Mm-hmm.
we can, we can hope that they actually are going to be even more beneficial,
Yeah.
because they're not working against the competition.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And what about, and not just what you eat, but how you eat?
Mm.
So the time that you take, what you do while you're eating.
Absolutely. So if we looked at that first, and then I'll go through some, specific foods
Yeah.
that help to support the adrenals. But when you eat, and the environment you eat in is absolutely critical when you're somebody who's suffering from adrenal fatigue.
Mm-hmm.
So the other thing is, in terms of when you eat and also how much you eat, in my experience, most people who suffer from adrenal fatigue also are suffering from digestive problems.
Mm-hmm.
So to alleviate some additional stress on the digestive system, it's a good idea in the initial healing stages to cut the amount of food that you're eating in one go
Mm-hmm.
and cut that down. And if that requires you to have, perhaps a few more meals spaced out throughout the day,
Mm-hmm.
that just helps to support and alleviate the amount of energy and output that the digestive system is having to go through
Mm-hmm.
each time it is fed. Okay, so that's
Yeah.
another way of just kind of managing
Mm-hmm.
a poor digestive system in situations like this.
Mm-hmm.
Eating breakfast, therefore, is
Mm-hmm.
incredibly important for people who are suffering from chronic fatigue.
Mm-hmm.
They need to learn how to balance their blood sugar levels first thing in the morning,
Mm-hmm.
and making sure that they have something that is balanced across the protein, fats, and carbohydrates first thing in the morning,
Mm-hmm.
um, is going to help them with that.
Mm-hmm.
Most cases, people, if they do have a breakfast, they're normally up and out with,
Mm-hmm.
either some sort of muffin or croissant, or,
Mm-hmm.
some
Mm-hmm.
boxed cereal,
Mm-hmm.
that's been very carb heavy,
Yeah.
the sort of thing that is going to elevate their blood sugar levels, bring them back down into a crash in the next 2 or 3 hours.
Yeah.
Then they're looking for the next, pick me up again, which invariably is again sugar,
Yeah.
which is, or some sort of sugary nature,
Yeah.
which again is stimulating the adrenals. It's
Yeah.
another stress response. It's another
Yeah.
stress response.
Yeah.
Okay, so um, when we eat is really important. Spacing our meals, making sure that we don't have any more than about 4 to 5 hours maximum
Mm-hmm.
between meals. Otherwise, again, you're eliciting a stress response from the body, because when the body feels like it's in a state of preservation, which is what it goes into
Mm-hmm.
when you miss a meal,
Mm-hmm.
it goes into that, fight and flight around, I don't know when I'm going to get fed next.
Mm-hmm.
So,
Mm-hmm.
that's another
Yeah.
stress that the body goes through.
Yep.
So making sure that the gaps aren't any, more than 4 to 5 hours. And then the environment. So the environment needs to be um, yin in nature is the
Yeah.
best way to,
Mm-hmm.
it needs
Mm-hmm.
to exude serenity,
Mm-hmm.
peace, calmness,
Mm-hmm.
in order for you to digest and assimilate and process that food.
Mm-hmm.
So, even things like reading
Yeah.
isn't a great idea,
Mm-hmm.
as much as it might be, calming. You might appear for it to feel calming to
Mm-hmm.
you while you're eating. The eyes have a very high correlation with the digestive system.
Mm-hmm.
And so we're taking energy away from the digestive system for you to use your eyes for the
Mm-hmm.
reading. And then again, the digestive system is like, I've got to do so much hard work here.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Um, Same thing, if you're listening to music, beautiful, but, choose the music wisely.
Sure. Yes. No death
Uh,
metal.
exactly. If you're in the company of people,
Yeah.
you want that company to be, peaceful, and there be a coherence between the
Yeah.
people you're choosing
Yeah.
to eat with.
Yeah.
So just think about the stimuli
Mm-hmm.
that, is affecting your environment when you're eating.
Mm-hmm.
So then we get into the nitty-gritty, really,
Yeah.
on what foods.
Yes.
Okay, so one of the biggest things that people miss out when it comes to healing their adrenals is the importance of good quality fats and proteins. Okay, they are absolutely the top of the list in terms of the raw material that we need to bring into our bodies in order to support our hormonal system to produce cholesterol, then converted into pregnenolone, then converted into what we need for the production of cortisol.
Right.
Okay, so in order to support our adrenal glands to make sufficient enough cortisol, we need to make sure we're getting the right raw materials in, which in this instance is actually good quality proteins and saturated fats.
Right.
Okay, so obviously, like every time we always speak, I talk about qualifying the quality. So it needs to be clean, chemical free, hormone free, unaltered, undenatured proteins and fats. Okay, so that might be, examples of that: good quality cuts of meat, and using a variety of cuts of meat, and then obviously fish as well, good oily, wild caught fish. Coconut oil is another great, saturated plant-based fat. And then other types of fat that aren't associated with animal products, things like avocados, olive oil, nuts and seeds, they have their place. I am cautious, very mindful around the use of polyunsaturated oils in circumstances like this, because they do tend to be highly processed, denatured, and they have a very pro-inflammatory response on the body, which is going to create more stress yet again.
What would be an example of a polyunsaturated fat?
So polyunsaturated oil example, canola oil, sunflower oil, more of your plant-based. Okay, and they move through a spectrum of polyunsaturated and monosaturated. So olive oil, for example, is monosaturated. Avocado oil is monosaturated. Okay. And you be careful of those because, they're all hidden in the baked items. They're all hidden in the packaged and boxed foods and processed packaged foods, and even in dips and sauces. So lots of places that these nasty oils, are used. Okay. And then, really importantly, because we're getting good quality animal sourced proteins, then we're going to be getting the vitamin B12 that is so important that we need to help rejuvenate your adrenals and your metabolism. And then good quality salt is really important. Celtic sea salt, Himalayan rock salt. Okay. The more vegetables that are in the family on the cruciferous.
Yes, I know. Cruciferous.
That's it, the cruciferous.
Yes.
Your broccoli, your Brussels sprouts, your kale, they're really, really good. Okay. Water.
Yes.
Really, really, it's such an important element. Okay. Maintaining what your body needs in its body weight. So in Australia, we use the matrix of 0.033 times your body weight in kilos gives you how many ounces, how many liters.
Right.
Okay, so that, that's what we use over here. Herbs, probably one of the more common herbs used and supplemented with for adrenal fatigue is ginseng and Siberian ginseng. There's another herb called ashwagandha, which I've used, which I've had some great success with as well. And another one called rhodolia. So, if you're looking at some herbal support in conjunction with everything else that you're doing, then, they're great herbs to look at. A wonderful resource book is 21st Century Chronic Fatigue Syndrome by James Wilson. We reference him a lot in Holistic Lifestyle Coaching Level 1.
Right.
And he has, a whole protocol that you would follow in order to, bring yourself back and heal the adrenals and heal every system that, takes a plunge as a result. It
And we'll
really is
put those references below in
yeah,
the
great.
post below. Yeah.
Great, great. Because it really is healing your adrenal system or your adrenal glands really is about working with nutrition to rebalance hormonally the production of those hormones that are under and over being produced.
Okay. Yeah.
And part of that, a key beginning factor of that is learning how to balance your blood sugar levels and responding to that insulin hormone.
Right. And so I'm getting from what we talked about in our last episode and today too that one of the morals of the story is don't be afraid of fat, right? Good, of course, good quality fat in moderation, but this idea that no fat, low fat is probably really unhealthy for us, and maybe even contributing in some ways to the episodes of chronic fatigue.
Massively, James. I mean, when people really understand the raw material of protein and fat in the role of actually making these key hormones that help to regulate the Hpa axis and regulate the adrenals. These are the key food materials, raw materials that help to regulate and stabilize our hormonal system.
Yeah.
And as you say, unfortunately, the lipid hypothesis of, however old that is now, 70, 80 years old, we are still, as much as thankfully many parts of medicine and many fraternities of doctors are now coming around and realizing how flawed the study was, but B, when you really look at what's going on out there and you look at the research, it just doesn't add up.
Yeah.
And therefore is really starting to understand that fat, good quality, clean, qualified fat is not the problem. And unfortunately, we are still dealing with the aftermath, the collateral damage to done with that one, Ansel Keys making the Times front cover, however many years ago. It was a paradigm shift, and it was a paradigm shift from medical to government, and therefore from government to recommendations at a massive level.
Yeah.
So thankfully we're coming around and we're understanding that that's not what the new science is sharing with us.
Right. Well, that was fantastic. And so we mentioned at the outset that you might have a little something special with us. And I understand for a limited time, I've raved about rocket fuel on a budget on pretty much every time we talk. I always go on and on about it. And so I understand you're for a limited time going to be giving away free copies of Rocket Fuel on a Budget.
Yes, absolutely. So for all of the listeners, James will put a little link below for you to click on, and for a limited time, you will be able to download the ebook of Rocket Fuel on a Budget for completely free.
Wow, that's great because I talk about how much I love the recipes, but this isn't just a recipe book, and that's one of the reasons why I love it. I mean, we talk about myth busting. There's a lot of myth busting that goes on there. One of the things that I would love to talk to you about in a future episode is your brain smart versus heart smart goals. I think this makes the book right there, well worth reading, and an important read to set goals that are really going to be motivating for you. And I love also how you've put in this book for each recipe how much it will cost to make that recipe. And it's, you talk, a lot of people will say, oh, organic is so expensive, but I think you demonstrate quite nicely that you can eat quite healthy and organic, well-sourced organic foods for relatively inexpensively. So I can't recommend Rocket Fuel on a Budget enough.
Thanks, James. So it's, I get great feedback, not just from the recipes, but as you say, people who just have bought it and read the the 17 things to avoid when trying to get healthy. And then, at the back of the book, I've kind of doubled and tripled that with, what to do in order to get healthy. And I think just for those 2 chapters, alone, there's so much great information that really puts people on the right track and, debunks, as you say, so much confusing information and contradictory information that's out there.
And we talked about the importance of breakfast, and that's one of the parts of your book that I've really relied heavily on, because, of course, we're all in a hurry to get out the door in the morning. But your buckwheat pancakes with apple compote, I love that. I love that. It's such a tasty, and you have a number of smoothie recipes in there as well that are really good for a quick but nutritional breakfast. So those are a fantastic section of the book.
Awesome. Well, for those people listening, they can get their hands on it right now.
Yep.
For free.
Link below. Link below. So go and get it. You won't regret it. It will be an important resource. So thanks so much, Joe. We're over our 20-minute target again, but this was, very instructional, really important to hear all of this information, and so thank you for taking the time to share with us.
You're welcome, James. Thank you so much. Thanks for having me.
Oh, anytime. And so next month, we're going to be talking about reducing pain and inflammation in the body. Again, really crucial. I have a feeling maybe it has something to do with healthy fats again. I could be wrong, but you'll have to join us and see next month. So thanks, Joe. Thanks, everybody who's with us today, and we will see you next month.
Bye, everyone.
Bye-bye.